Welcome back to the channel and to our series of Britain in the 1980s. A big thanks for your support of the channel so far, and if you haven't subscribed yet, then hit that button and tell your friends all about it. It's completely free and I can guarantee you more nostalgia than you can handle. Right, let's get started, this time 1987. And if you were in the southeast of England, you had a very cold start to the year. The Big Freeze of 1987, as it was named, saw the heaviest snow to fall in that part of the UK since the winter of 1981. Over 50 centimetres of snow fell in southeast England, with some locations reporting snowfall at 75 centimetres. The effect was stark, as motoring organisations had to deal with more than 4,000 breakdowns and 500 schools were forced to close. The kids weren't complaining though. The extreme cold weather even affected the chiming hammer of Big Ben, and at Southend-on-Sea the sea froze over, whilst Rutland saw the mercury dip to minus 23.3, making it the coldest recorded temperature in the East Midlands at the time. New Year's Day saw the release of a film that's gone down in history as a British cult classic, With Neil and I. The black comedy about two unemployed actors starred Paul McGann and Richard E. Grant, and is often lauded as one of the best British films ever, and is regularly voted as such in public polls. In a decade marred by crowd trouble and tragedy, police were setting about cleaning up the image of English football. Operation Full Time was aimed at capturing the ringleaders of the gangs from West Ham and Millwall. Police carried out a series of dawn raids and made 26 arrests in their biggest operation so far against soccer hooliganism in England. In royal news, Prince Edward, at the age of 24, resigned from the Royal Marines on the 14th of January, shortly after officially joining only a few months earlier. He dropped out of the Commando Corps, having completed 1/3 of the 12-month training. Media reported that Prince Philip, who was Captain General of the Royal Marines, was displeased. I think raging may have been more accurate. On the 26th, Terry Waite, the special envoy of the Archbishop of Canterbury in Lebanon, disappeared in Beirut whilst negotiating for the release of hostages. He remained a hostage himself until 1991. And as the month ended, the privatisation and flotation of British Airways on the stock market began. As the airline was taken out of state ownership, it also began the takeover process of British Caledonian, which was completed in July. Into February, and Ford launched a new model in their Sierra range. The Sierra Sapphire appeared on Britain's roads, whilst other models went through a facelift. The Church of England's General Synod voted to allow the ordination of women as priests. The groundwork was put in place, and the first woman to be ordained as a priest in the Church of England was Angela Burnous-Wilson in March 1994. 1987 saw a few tragic events in the UK, and the first came on the 6th of February when the British Channel ferry the Herald of Free Enterprise capsized whilst leaving the harbour of Zeebrugge in Belgium, killing 193 people on board. The disaster was caused by the failure to close the bow doors on the ship's departure from Zeebrugge harbour on its way to Dover. The car deck quickly filled with water and capsized within 4 minutes of leaving its berth. On the 28th of March, former Doctor Who actor Patrick Troughton died of a heart attack at a hotel in Georgia, USA. And March ended with a huge sum of money being paid for an iconic painting. Christie's auction house in London sold one of Vincent van Gogh's iconic Sunflowers paintings for a mind-boggling £24,750,000. To April, and Britain came close to the return of the death penalty. It went to the vote in the House of Commons, where MPs voted 342 to 230 against its return. The auction rooms were red hot again in April, this time when the jewellery of the late Duchess of Windsor went under the hammer in Switzerland. The gems went for a massive £31 million, including a diamond brooch which actress Elizabeth Taylor bought for £400,000. On the 5th of April, Arsenal won the League Cup for the first time in their history with a 2-1 win over Liverpool, earning them their first major trophy since 1979. Charlie Nicholas scored both of Arsenal's goals. The UK's first hospital ward dedicated to the treatment of people with HIV and AIDS was opened by Diana, Princess of Wales at the Middlesex Hospital in London. At a time when AIDS deaths were hitting their peak and fear around the virus was rife, Diana broke down barriers with pictures of her shaking hands and hugging patients on the new Broderip ward. And as the football season drew to a close in May, Everton were crowned champions of Division 1, with neighbours Liverpool in second place. Leicester, Man City and Aston Villa all made the drop into Division 2, whilst Charlton Athletic won the end-of-season playoff in the season of the introduction of playoffs throughout the English leagues. Coventry City won the FA Cup for the first time in their history with a 3-2 win over Spurs in extra time, thanks to a Gary Mabbutt own goal. And it was the underdog that won the Scottish Cup final. St Mirren beat Dundee United by a 0-0 to lift the silverware at Hampden Park. And a random fact for you as well, it was the last Scottish Cup final where all of the players and managers of both clubs were 100% of Scottish nationality. Rangers won the Scottish Premier Division, whilst Clydebank and Hamilton Academical faced relegation. Back to the news, and the 11th of June was General Election Day in the UK, and it saw Margaret Thatcher secure her third term in office as Prime Minister. Her parliamentary majority was reduced to 102, compared to the 144-seat majority gained at the election 4 years earlier. In royal news, the Queen granted the title of Princess Royal to her daughter Anne, 22 years after the death of the previous holder of the title. On the 27th of June, 25 years after the first James Bond film was released, The Living Daylights premiered in London, with the spy now being played by Timothy Dalton in the first of his 2 Bond movies. Okay, before we hit the second half of 1987, let's have a bit of retail therapy once again. The average weekly wage in the UK was £182 a week. Off to Asda for the weekly shop first of all, where a wholemeal loaf was 41 pence, a 2-litre bottle of lemonade 49 pence, and 60 pence for an iceberg lettuce. A shout out to someone who commented on one of my previous videos who used to work in the TV rentals markets and said that TV rentals started to die out around 1987, and these were the monthly fees to rent the latest TVs and videos from Granada. A large TV and video recorder for around £32 per month. And finally to cars, where Lada were on a big marketing drive in 1987 for the Riva model, using customer testimonials to try and convince people that every comedian in the 1980s who was making a living out of Lada jokes were wrong. The top of the range Riva was going for £4,400 on the road. What do you call a Lada with a sunroof? A rubbish skip. It had to be done. As July began, one of the largest bank robberies in history took place when robbers with handguns entered the Knightsbridge Safe Deposit Centre, broke open many of the safe deposit boxes and left with a hoard estimated to be worth around £60 million. A fingerprint left behind led police to the culprits, who were imprisoned for 22 years. Britain had a brand new theme park in 1987 as summer arrived. Chessington Zoo was renamed Chessington World of Adventures and made into a theme park by owner Madame Tussauds. Prince Edward attended the official opening on the 7th of July. Novelist and former Conservative MP Geoffrey Archer won a libel case against the Daily Star newspaper over allegations he was involved in a vice ring. Later in 2001, he was convicted and imprisoned for perjury in connection with this case. Then on the 27th of July, pop music's most reliable man released his debut single. Rick Astley promised he was never going to give you up and a whole lot of other things. The song spent 5 weeks at number 1 and was the year's biggest selling single. Commuters in London had a scary experience in July as the Queen officially opened the Docklands Light Railway, the UK's first railway where the trains had no drivers. That still scares me. The end of July saw the launch of Peter Wright's book Spycatcher, a memoir written by the former MI5 officer where he drew on his experiences and research into the history of the British intelligence community. The book was banned in England due to its allegations about government policy and incidents. August was dominated by a horrific incident. Michael Ryan shot dead 14 people in the Berkshire town of Hungerford before taking his own life in what became known as the Hungerford Massacre. The death toll rose to 16 when 2 more people died later in hospital from their injuries. In October, Swedish homeware retailer IKEA opened its first British store in Warrington and subjected the UK to a world of self-assembly furniture and some rather tasty meatballs. And Operation Deep Scan was launched in Loch Ness in a bid to locate the Loch Ness Monster. The operation cost £1 million and guess what? There was no monster. Money well spent, eh? On the evening of the 15th of October, trusty weatherman Michael Fish stood in front of his wobbly weather map and reassured the nation that the rumoured storm that was alleged to hit Britain wasn't going to happen. And then this happened a few hours later. Yes, the Great Storm of 1987 saw hurricane-force winds batter much of southeast England, killing 23 people and causing extensive damage to property. 2 days after the end of the storm, some 250,000 homes in the region were still without electricity. Poor old Michael never lived that one down. Then a few days later, there was a major storm on the stock market as Black Monday hit the London Stock Exchange, with £50 billion wiped off the value of shares. And October ended with one of Britain's most famous sportsmen being arrested. Retired jockey Lester Piggott was sentenced to 3 years imprisonment for tax evasion. As November began, the rise in popularity of acid house music saw the first reports of illegal raves being held in derelict buildings across the UK. And in a bid to shake off the stigma of always running late, British Rail set a new world speed record for diesel traction as a test Intercity 125 reached 148.4 miles per hour between York and Darlington, but the train still ran late. London had a brand new airport in 1987 as the Queen officially opened the new London City Airport in the Docklands area. The airport was designed to principally serve the new financial district and in its first year of operation handled 133,000 passengers. A children's TV favourite made his debut in October as Fireman Sam hit our screens for the first time. The show, voiced and narrated by John Alderton, started on Welsh channel S4C and debuted on BBC One soon afterwards. The show is still running at the time of recording this in 2025. A bomb exploded during a Remembrance Day service at Enniskillen, killing 11 people. It was the highest death toll in a terrorist attack in Northern Ireland for 5 years. At least 63 people were injured in the blast, 9 of them seriously. The device went off without warning at 10:45 AM at the town's cenotaph, where people had gathered to pay their respects to the war dead. And yet another tragedy struck on the 18th of November, the King's Cross fire. 31 people lost their lives as fire ignited under a wooden escalator at London's King's Cross Underground station, before spreading into the ticket hall in a flashover. Many new safety features were implemented in the aftermath of the tragedy across London's tube network. The 15th of December saw the first sod cut, commencing the construction of the Channel Tunnel, linking England to France. And on Christmas Day 1987, over 25 million viewers tuned in to see one of Coronation Street's longest serving and most loved characters say her goodbyes to the cobbles for good. Or should that be sing her goodbyes? Hilda Ogden, played by Jean Alexander, bowed out of the soap for the last time after 23 years. And with that fine singing voice, we say goodbye to 1987. Thanks for watching once again, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy these videos. I'll see you again on the next one.